It's a fair question to ask. Why would someone keep a pet reptile? And if you already know the answer to that, how do you choose which one to start with? The reason why that is not a simple question to answer is that each one of you is an individual and will have different personalities and capabilities. So this video is going to be a bit different from what you're used to. Instead of just giving you a list of beginner species, we're going to explore the why behind it so you know the thought process to making the decision that matches the right reptile to who you are. I will go over what it's like keeping reptiles, what are great candidates to start with, and by the end of the video, you'll have a grasp on what reptiles you can start with and how you know when you're ready to level up. My name is Bill Strand. Welcome to the Misty Forest, where here, there be dragons. Before we jump into talking about the reptiles themselves, let's talk about the appeal of reptiles as pets. Obviously, there will be as many reasons as there are people. Some people need a pet that's hypoallergenic because they're allergic to cat hair or dog hair. And some people want some companionship, but they live in a small apartment. But there are some common threads through them all. First and foremost, I believe, is a love for the fantastic. If dragons and dinosaurs capture your imagination, well then reptiles are a chance to live with one that won't eat you. And more so than just living out a childhood dream, reptiles are intelligent. And some look at us with curiosity. They will not give us the same relationship as a cat or a dog, but if you're up for learning what the world looks like through reptilian eyes, then getting involved with reptiles becomes a lifetime of learning. But where to start? Lizards, snakes, turtles, tortoises, salamanders, frogs, tarantulas, jumping spiders, isopods, green banana roaches, and even carnivorous plants. Now, you're going to be saying, Bill, wait a minute, those aren't all reptiles. And that's true. And we know that. But within the community, when we talk about the reptile community, it kind of ends up being an umbrella term of anything that is fantastic. First, let's talk about what we mean when we say a species is a good beginner reptile. You would assume that that means that the care requirements are easy and well understood, and that the animal itself is hardy. And this is true, and we'll definitely go into those things, but we're also going to add another element. There's certain aspects of who you are that determine what a beginner reptile would be for you. I recently had the opportunity to hang out with some fellow YouTubers. Content creators tend to think things through because they are constantly making content and having to figure out how to present topics. And so a gathering of YouTubers at the 5th birthday party of Clint's Reptile Room was an awesome opportunity to bring in some other perspectives. Clint Laidlaw is the face behind the very popular YouTube channel, Clint's Reptiles. Since 2017, he has released a weekly show rating reptiles for their pet potential. If anyone has spent years thinking about reptiles as pets, it would be him. And so I asked him what he thought the difference was between a beginner reptile and a more advanced reptile. Here's Clint.
I would say the primary difference is how many mistakes you can make without having a catastrophic problem. A beginner reptile is just something that's probably a little bit hardier, can tolerate a wider range of temperatures, humidity, diets, without having a catastrophic collapse. And so there's no reason that they're not super suitable for an advanced keeper, because some of them are some of the coolest reptiles with the best behaviors that you could ever keep, and you can always up your game and give them a better enclosure, a better life, see more naturalistic behaviors. But there are some reptiles that if you get it a little bit wrong, they will die or experience permanent issues as a result of your mistakes. And sometimes as a brand new keeper, even if you're doing all the research you can, you don't totally understand everything that you're reading, everything that you're hearing about, and how important it is and how to apply it and what that really looks like, sometimes until you've tried it a little bit. And one way to bypass this would be to have a mentor, someone that you can work with who is an advanced keeper and you can see it firsthand. But if you haven't, you can do your best and still make a big mistake. And so sometimes it's better to start with something that will tolerate a few mistakes as you learn just some of the lingo, some of the ropes, and then you can move on to things that require more specialized care. And I would say only if those are the animals that you really, really want to interact with, because these ones that are considered beginner animals, some of them are just fantastic and you will never get bored with them.
You notice how Clint referenced not totally understanding everything that you're reading? Sometimes, even though the care guides are written out and available, the information inside isn't always easily understandable, and you may still need some experience to truly understand what they're writing. This is where the mentors Clint mentioned come in. Now, mentors, remember this, because that's foreshadowing of something we're going to talk about in a little while. All the care guides, YouTube videos, and all the information out there allows you to take advantage of all of the work that's been done before. But you can supercharge your experience by finding those who have gone through the beginner stage already. There is nothing like having the information and having somebody help you interpret what all those numbers and infographics mean in actual execution. But let's not leave the topic of how we define a good beginner reptile just yet. Bob Bledsoe of Green Room Pythons specializes in snakes. He has a thriving YouTube channel educating the community on topics related to snakes. So I knew he would have a deep perspective on this question. I asked him, what makes a snake a beginner snake?
A beginner snake would be one that is simpler to keep, that doesn't have a ton of complicated parameters. You know, when you're a beginner reptile keeper, you got to figure out how heat works. Like, how does that work with the thermostat and keeping it regulated and things like that? And there are some snakes that are more advanced because they require a bunch more things. They need like a heat drop in or a temperature drop at night, stuff like that.
Okay, we're starting to get deeper into this. Every reptile is perfectly suited for their environment. They have to be, or else they would quickly die out. But there are so many different environments they live in, from the deserts to the jungles to the cold mountaintops. The most prominent skill we as reptile keepers need to develop is the ability to create the right environment for that reptile within the enclosure that we have them in. So we have to learn how to use the imperfect tools we have available to us, including different types of cages, lights, heating systems, misters, cooling systems, ventilation. You get the idea. So this is starting to paint a picture that a beginner or advanced reptile isn't inherently stronger or weaker. What Clint and Bob are talking about is how tricky is it to recreate their environment. So one would expect that how easy it is to keep a reptile depends a great deal on how close their natural environment is to your home's ambient conditions and how easy it is for you to modify those conditions in a cage. For example, a lizard, like a bearded dragon, that likes it hotter in the day than most homes can get that warm up with a basking lamp. Simple. A lizard like a Jackson's chameleon that requires a nighttime drop in temperature to the low 60s Fahrenheit, or better yet, the 50s Fahrenheit, requires an air conditioning unit in many cases. Both lizards are hardy within their environments, but the modifications for the bearded dragon is easier to implement than it is for the Jackson's chameleon. Of course, while creating the proper environment is arguably the main determination for hardiness and beginner worthiness, there are other factors that come into play. Here is Bob again to expand on that.
An advanced snake is maybe a little bit more difficult to keep as far as parameters, but also an advanced snake would be one that grows a lot bigger, or one that tends to be super food aggressive, or defensive, snakes that are more defensive, like an Amazon tree boa. Not a very big snake, but generally super defensive.
There are some reptiles that are drop-dead gorgeous, and it's easy to fall in love with their pictures. But in person can be a challenge. So with so many species of reptiles out there, how do you know what would make a good first lizard, snake, tortoise, turtle, frog, etc.? The easiest way for me to do this section would be to flash up a list of commonly accepted beginner reptiles. Heck, here you go. But I'd like to be more thoughtful with this video. What reptile you start off with is a combination of your level of dedication and what information is available to you. But there is one bottom line. Get a captive bred reptile. Acclimating a wild-caught reptile is not a beginner project. Yes, they're cheaper. And yes, people at Reptile Expo will sell it to you without question. No one's going to save you from making this mistake except you. Now, a reputable breeder may refuse to sell you one of their babies until they're sure you're ready, but you usually don't have that safety net when someone's selling you a wild-caught reptile. The acclimation process for a wild-caught reptile includes deparasitization. It includes getting them used to being in a cage, getting them used to human beings, even getting them used to the captive diet. Let the breeders take care of all of that. They're the ones who need the wild-caught bloodlines, and they're the ones who are experienced in helping the reptiles through that process. They will give the wild-caught reptiles a corner of their own, privacy. All they have to do is breed, eat, and be happy. And they're the ones that will produce the captive bred babies that will be perfect for pets for you. Use the keeper. Pay the extra and get the captive bred baby. Believe me, it is night and day difference. I have extensive experience in acclimating wild-caught reptiles, and I will get on a 6-month waiting list to get the captive bred reptile. And the bonus, of course, is that if you work with a breeder, then you have your mentor. Remember what Clint said about a mentor helping you be successful? This cannot be overstated. Reading something is one thing, understanding it can get tricky, especially when we're talking about something like reptile keeping where there's so much tribal knowledge. It's actually rare for the most experienced people to be good at communicating and be on social media and sharing what they know. And the people who are good at social media aren't necessarily the ones that are the most experienced. If you're a part of a reptile community that has an expert who is good at communication, bonus. Otherwise, you're going to be on a Raiders of the Lost Ark type quest to find the good information. And to talk more about that, I want to introduce you to Garrett Hartle of Reach Out Reptiles. Garrett has an extensive YouTube channel where he educates about the snakes and reptiles he works with. Garrett specializes in reticulated pythons. Yes, the longest snake in the world. But there are dwarf sizes that are amazingly sweet, as I found out when hanging out with Garrett and learning more about these beautiful snakes. Garrett shared his advice to beginners about finding a mentor.
You're going to want to learn as much as you can, and then every time you have a question, reach out to an expert. This might be the biggest thing for a beginner, honestly. You're going to need more customer service than anyone before. And if you want to do it right, your choice is talk to a knowledgeable breeder that you have a relationship with, or talk to your vet, which is very expensive, right? So if you're saying, well, I'm a beginner, how do I have a relationship with a knowledgeable breeder? It's pretty easy. Buy your snake or lizard from them. Buy from a knowledgeable breeder. Explain to them the challenges that you think you'll face, that you are a beginner. You can ask for a little patience. Hey, I'm sorry if I asked some dumb questions. Most of us who are promoting the keeping, responsible keeping of the species that we work with, we love to answer those kinds of questions. We want to expand that knowledge base. We're very happy to do that for you. But if you don't have that relationship with us because you rescued one, you bought it at a reptile show, it was cute, you had that much money in your pocket, you forget who you bought it from, you don't have a phone number, you don't have a relationship, you're going to have to call a knowledgeable reptile vet and pay them for their time. Most keepers will do, or most breeders rather, will do that for keepers for free when they've purchased that animal from them, because I have a secondary motive now that, you know, when I produce a baby snake, I freaking love that snake. That's my baby, and I want it to do well. So even if I think you're the biggest jerk on the planet, I want to make sure that my baby is well. I somehow sold a snake to the biggest jerk on the planet. Let's make sure that they know a thing or two about what they're working with here so my baby is okay. Bring that motivation to the table, forge that relationship at the beginning, get them from the best breeder you can possibly find, do your homework, look for reviews online, go from there.
A major success factor is working with a mentor. Now, this mentor is probably going to be the breeder that you purchase from. So let's go over what a mentor is. A mentor is someone with deep experience in the reptile that you're interested in. They are there to help you when you get stuck with contradictions or blank spaces. But what they're not there for is they're not there to take the place of your research. I know once you find someone like this, it's very easy to just ask whatever question comes to your mind. I mean, that does save a lot of work for you. But this is a waste of the time you have with your mentor. Treat it as precious, like you only have limited amount of questions, and only ask them the questions that you can't find through research. Here's your action item list to find such a mentor. First, decide what kind of reptile you want to work with. Second, research the breeders. And if you can't find any breeders, then think twice about getting involved with that reptile. There's going to be a reason why there aren't any breeders. And at this point, you're not interested in blazing any new trails. We definitely need people like that, but save that for a little bit later. Next, read everything that your selected breeder or top 3 breeders have written, interviews they have given, videos they have created, podcasts they have gone on, and go back and absorb everything that they have put out into the world. If when you finally do talk to them, you show that you've done your research, that is going to go a long way for your relationship. Next, find out on social media where they hang out. Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, wherever. You want to be able to go and see your mentors, your breeders. You want to see how they interact with people, what kind of information they put out into the world. There really isn't a black and white checklist that I can give you to rate them. What you're doing at this point is you're seeing, is this the kind of person you want to work with? And that's determined by your personal judgment. Once you think you've done enough research, then contact the breeder. You can do this via email versus some messenger. Your purpose in this first meeting with them is to see if you are prepared. Often when I have first contact with the breeder, I'll actually have the cage either mocked up or set up already. And what this does is it shows them how much I've already done. If you have done all of the research that you're supposed to do, you won't have to tell the breeder that you've read all their stuff because they'll know by the type of questions you ask. And the purpose in all of this is going to be to see if they think you are ready for this reptile. And this isn't because you're trying to get their approval as a person. What you're trying to do is say, okay, breeder, you care about the babies that you send out. Do you consider me and my setup and how much I know sufficient that you want to send your baby to come live with me? So it's not a personal affirmation, it's a confirmation that you've got everything in place. Now, the most important one, the last one, purchase from the breeder that has the best information. In other words, do not price shop and purchase from the person that's going to give you the cheapest price and then show up at the breeder expert mentor's doorstep wanting support. You get support from the person you gave money to. And you can see the problem if you bought something from the show where you gave money to somebody, you don't even know who they are, you don't know how to contact them, and even if you did, you're not sure that they would know exactly what species they sold you. I hate to say it, but it is not uncommon for this to happen. We create the community we want to live in with our wallet, not our words, with our wallet. These breeder mentors don't have time to save the world. They're responsible for their customers. Therefore, the best way to get the best information is to purchase a baby from the person who has the experience that you need to make you successful. When you buy from the breeder, you're buying a lifetime of support for your reptile. Respect the value of that benefit when you make your purchase decision.
So, when do you know if you're ready to go up to the next level? Good question. And at this point of the discussion, it's probably a good idea to define some terms. Now, there's no official definition anywhere. This is just what I use.
A beginner reptile is one where the care requirements are well laid out and easy to access. The ability to implement care is easy. It may not be inexpensive, but it's just following the care guide. An intermediate level reptile is one where their care requirements are known, but there could be some challenges in implementation, and a mentorship of some type is a good idea. The setup may be costly, and you probably need some level of skill to keep the system running. An advanced reptile is one where you are helping discover the care requirements. Since we aren't 100% sure, much of the husbandry relies on your instinct. Also in this category are reptiles that require excessively large living area and can seriously hurt or kill human beings. Now that's the reptiles. I'd like to expand this out and talk about the keepers. A beginning reptile keeper is one that is curious and enthusiastic, but is trying reptile keeping out to see if it fits into their lifestyle. An intermediate reptile keeper is one that knows they love reptiles and is willing to do what it takes to research their species deeply and provide whatever their reptile needs. An advanced reptile keeper has integrated reptile keeping into their life and is giving back to the community by being an example or sharing what they are learning.
Now, it usually doesn't work for someone to keep a reptile that's above their keeper level, but it does work for an advanced keeper or an intermediate keeper to keep a beginner reptile. And that's because there's so much that you can do with the reptile beyond just keeping it alive. You can determine the best husbandry possible. You can start being a mentor and helping other people be successful with that species. And this is a way that you can truly give back to the community. And Clint touched on that. He talked about advanced keepers working with beginning reptiles.
There's no reason that they're not super suitable for an advanced keeper, because some of them are some of the coolest reptiles with the best behaviors that you could ever keep. And you can always up your game and give them a better enclosure, a better life, see more naturalistic behaviors.
You could spend your entire reptile keeping life with bearded dragons, ball pythons, leopard or crested geckos and never get bored.
But what if you're thinking of something more intermediate, like chameleons or satanic leaf-tailed geckos? Satanic leaf-tailed geckos, or Euryplatus fantasticus, are amazing leaf mimics from Madagascar. They are active during the night, but during the day they hang in bizarre poses to disguise their true nature as good things to eat. Everything about them is meant to look like a dead leaf stuck in the branches, and they pull this off amazingly well. These geckos are incredible and highly sought after. They would be considered an intermediate reptile because they like to be kept humid and cool. They are comfortable in the low 70s Fahrenheit, and going into the 80s invites death. They are more of a vivarium species and not suited for handling. So this is definitely a species that has to be kept by someone who is past the beginner decision stage and well into the intermediate passionate stage. You have to be willing to give them specific conditions and fastidiously maintain them. This is Yvette Strand from Misty Mountain Fance, and she's taking pictures of the babies that she has up for sale. Yvette is dedicated to Euryplatus fantasticus and specializes in bringing in wild-caught individuals to supply bloodline diversity to the captive population. But she loves working with people who recognize the beauty of these geckos and enjoy keeping one as a pet. And so I asked Yvette, what kind of keeper would do well with a gecko that is awake at night and spends the entire day trying to look like a dead leaf? And she told me, it all depends on your lifestyle. If you want something beautiful but you work all day, Euryplatus is the perfect choice for you. Build up that naturalistic environment, and when you get home at night, they're ready to be fed. Now, are they a beginner reptile? No, they aren't your typical pet, and if you want to hold your pet, well, this is going in the wrong direction. You can hold them, and they'll either just sit there and look at you, or else they'll jump to try to get away. But if you do that too often, their tail is going to fall off, and those beautiful tails don't grow back. So this isn't a good choice for a beginner reptile unless you are seriously detail orientated. I mean, they're hardy and they can easily live over 10 years. So I think that the perfect Euryplatus keeper would be the one that's fascinated by Euryplatus and wants to create an environment for them. So we're starting to get into that philosophy of thinking about your pet as part of the environment, and it's the environment which is your project. Now, the nice thing about Euryplatus fantasticus is it usually isn't the beginners who even know that they exist. You have to be a little bit further into the reptile community before you even know where to look for them. Now, say you wanted to go with Eurypletus fantasticus. I got some tips with Yvette on how to be successful. The first was to get a larger cage than you think you need. She recommends a 36-inch tall cage. And the reason is because even though they look like they're sleeping during the day, which they are, and they don't move much during the day, they are not sedentary animals. If you come out during the night, they are bouncing around the cage. They are all over the place. So give them the room to jump. And then second, the most important, is you need air conditioning. The Eurypletus fantasticus needs to be kept around 72 degrees, and that's a non-negotiable. If you start getting up into the 80s, you're starting into the area where you could be killing your fantasticus. And so this temperature requirement is really what makes them an intermediate reptile. You have to have the dedication to have air conditioning for your reptile, and that's more than just buying a heat lamp. You need a room, you need an air conditioning unit or central air conditioning, and the willingness to pay the electricity bill for keeping a cool weather species. So the care conditions are simple, readily available. They just take a certain level of dedication to implement. And with that last statement, I think we've come to an understanding of the difference between beginner and intermediate. While it can be in what kind of information is available, we live in an age of a deluge of information. And so it comes down to, are you dedicated to put in the time to do the research and then to give them exactly what they need?
So where do we go from here? When you bring a reptile into your life, you are literally bringing in a life form that looks at the world completely differently than you. While reptiles can provide companionship for some people, because they can be wickedly smart, and some break the mold and want to come out and interact with you, most reptiles provide a way for us to connect to nature. I have learned about the world through my love for reptiles. I know many people who got their first chameleon without knowing where Madagascar was on the map. And now they are curious as to where their chameleon came from. And then they learn about the environmental destruction going on and start thinking about how they can help. Reptiles are a conduit for us to learn about the environment on the other side of the world. The wonderful thing about reptiles is that the most common reptiles are also the nicest ones to work with. You don't have to pine for the intermediate or advanced species to be fully satisfied. But if your curiosity has been set on fire, your options go beyond what you could hope to experience in one lifetime.
The great thing about this digital age is with podcasts and YouTube videos, you can get all the information you need before you bring the reptile home. And that's what we're going to be doing here. And so whether you're looking into getting your first reptile or you think maybe it's time to level up, this is a place for you to hang out and get the information you need. Welcome to Misty Forest Dragons. I'm glad you're here.